The Apache took the young virgin by mistake. She feigned sleep, yet awoke carrying his child. Eliza lived on the edge of the wilderness with her family. Their small farm was surrounded by tall trees, rolling hills, and a river that wound quietly through the valley. Life on the frontier was never easy. Every day, Eliza helped her mother with chores, fetching water from the river, feeding the chickens, and tending the small garden that provided vegetables for the family. Her father worked long hours in the fields, planting and harvesting crops, and sometimes traveling to the nearby settlement to trade for supplies. Life was simple, quiet, and hard, but it was safe, or so they thought. Eliza was only 16, with long brown hair that shone in the sunlight and eyes that seemed too old for her young face. She had learned early how to be careful. She watched the world closely, listening to the sounds of the wind in the trees, the calls of birds, and even the distant hooves of horses passing along the trails. Her life was quiet, almost lonely, but she loved the freedom of the fields and the forests. She could walk for hours, imagining stories of distant lands and wondering what lay beyond the hills she could see in the distance. One morning, as the sun rose and the mist lifted from the fields, Eliza noticed a strange silence around the farm. The birds did not sing, and even the river seemed quieter than usual. She felt a chill in her heart, though the air was warm. Her mother was busy in the kitchen, stirring porridge and humming softly, and her father was in the fields, chopping weeds from the corn. Eliza stayed outside, tending the chickens, but her eyes kept moving to the tree line where the forest began. She could see shadows moving between the trees, quick shapes that disappeared whenever she looked directly. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the edge of the forest. It was a man on horseback, his clothes different from anything Eliza had seen before. His eyes were dark and sharp, and he rode with a confidence that made her heart pound. Before she could react, more figures appeared, riding silently and quickly through the trees. They were small in number but moved with a purpose that made Eliza freeze. She realized with a shock that they were Apache warriors and they were very close. Fear washed over her, sharp and cold. She had heard stories from travelers about the conflicts between settlers and the Apache, but she had never imagined they would come this close to her home. Her father shouted from the field when he saw the riders. "Eliza, inside!" "Hurry!" But before she could move, the warriors were upon the farm. They did not shout or attack in anger. They moved with precision, almost like they had a plan, and in the confusion, one of them reached for Eliza. She tried to run, but fear and surprise made her legs stiff. She struggled, but the man lifted her onto his horse quickly. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought it might be heard by everyone. Her father ran toward them, but the warriors turned and disappeared into the forest as quickly as they had come. Eliza's mind raced. She felt herself being carried away from the only life she had ever known. The wind rushed past her face, and the trees blurred as the horse moved swiftly through the forest trails. She could hear the faint calls of her family in the distance, but the voices were small and far away, swallowed by the forest. Panic and fear mixed with a strange sense of disbelief. She could not understand why this was happening. Why her? Why now? She tried to speak, to cry out, but her voice seemed trapped inside her throat. After a while, she realized she had to stay calm. Screaming or struggling might make things worse. She looked at the man riding beside her. His face was serious but not cruel. He glanced at her once and then focused on the path ahead. Eliza decided, almost instinctively, to pretend she was asleep. She relaxed her body and let her head drop to her chest, keeping her eyes closed. Her mind spun with questions and fear, but she forced herself to breathe slowly, to make no sudden movements. The forest around them was dense and dark. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating patterns on the ground that seemed to dance as the horse moved. Birds flew quickly away from the trees as the horse passed. Eliza felt the smell of the earth, fresh and damp, and she heard the distant sound of a stream rushing over rocks. Even in her fear, the forest was beautiful, and she found herself noticing small things: a bright red berry on a bush, a fallen log covered in moss, the way the sunlight made tiny specks of dust sparkle in the air. She held on tightly to the horse, her knuckles white, but she allowed her mind to focus on small details to calm herself. Hours passed. The ride seemed endless. Her body ached from holding herself stiffly, and her stomach growled from hunger. She wondered where they were taking her. She tried to remember the stories her mother had told her about the land and the trails, hoping she might recognize something and find a chance to escape. But the forest was unfamiliar. Every tree and rock looked the same. The only sound was the pounding of the horse's hooves and the occasional rustle of leaves as other animals moved away from the intruders. Finally, the horse stopped. Eliza did not open her eyes at first. She waited, holding her breath. She felt the man dismount beside her and lift her down gently but firmly. She could hear water running nearby and the sound of birds returning to the trees. He spoke to someone, a soft voice in a language she did not understand. They spoke quietly, and she realized she could not understand what they were saying. Her heart beat wildly. She stayed still, pretending to sleep, keeping her body relaxed. Time passed slowly. The man moved around her, checking supplies, speaking to others, and sometimes glancing at her. Eliza felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. She wanted to look, to see who he really was, but she stayed motionless. She focused on controlling her breathing, on making herself small and invisible. She told herself that if she stayed calm, perhaps she would survive this encounter. Perhaps she would find a way home again. Eventually, the group moved again. The horse carried her a short distance, and then they stopped once more. Eliza felt the tension in her body ease slightly. The man who had taken her seemed less alert now, almost distracted. She opened her eyes a little, just enough to see the sunlight on the leaves and the flowing water of the stream beside them. She saw the other warriors preparing something, their movements quiet and careful. She felt a sudden wave of hope. Perhaps she could find a way to escape, or perhaps they would realize she did not belong with them. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Eliza felt herself growing more aware of her surroundings. The forest was alive with sounds: the chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves, the occasional call of a bird heading home. She realized she had survived the first hours of her ordeal, and that was a small victory. She began to think about her family, about her home, and about the life she wanted to return to. She promised herself that she would not give up, that she would find a way to get back to them. The night came, and with it, shadows that made the forest seem even more mysterious and frightening. The warriors built a small fire, and Eliza felt the warmth on her face. She stayed still, careful not to draw attention. She thought about the stories her mother had told her, about the spirits of the forest and the animals that could guide travelers. She whispered small prayers to herself, asking for safety and courage. Though she was alone and afraid, she felt a small spark of hope growing inside her. She had survived the day, and she would survive the night. By the time she drifted into a light, uneasy sleep, she had made a silent vow. She would not be a victim of fear. She would be brave. She would be careful, clever, and strong. No matter what happened next, she would find a way to live, and one day, perhaps, to return home. Eliza woke slowly as the first light of dawn crept through the trees. The night had been long, full of strange sounds that kept her on edge. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig made her heart jump. When she finally opened her eyes fully, she saw the camp had been abandoned. The fire had died down, leaving only faint smoke that curled into the morning air. She sat up carefully, looking around. The forest seemed calm now, peaceful even, but she knew better than to trust appearances. Danger could be near, hidden in the shadows or behind the trees. She took a deep breath and tried to remember the direction they had come from. Her mind searched for familiar signs, the shape of the hills, the curve of the river, or even a particular tree she might recognize. The forest was dense, and every tree looked the same, but she tried to stay calm. Panic would only make her weaker. She decided to move slowly, quietly, keeping low to the ground. Every step was cautious, her eyes scanning for any sign of people or animals that could give her clues. The morning air was crisp, carrying the smell of wet leaves and earth. Birds sang softly and the wind whispered through the branches. It was beautiful, but Eliza felt no joy. Her mind was full of worry for her family and fear of what might happen next. She wondered if they would even know she had been taken. Would they search for her? Or would they assume the worst? She had no answers. All she could do was try to find her way back. Hours passed and the sun rose higher, warming her face. She moved carefully through the underbrush, avoiding broken branches that might snap and make noise. She stopped often to listen, trying to hear her family's voices or the sound of the farm in the distance. Nothing came. She began to feel the weight of exhaustion in her legs and hunger in her stomach. She had eaten little the day before, and now her stomach reminded her sharply of her need for food. She looked around and found a small stream. The water was clear and cold. She knelt down and drank slowly, savoring each sip. She felt a little stronger after that. As she continued walking, she noticed signs of animals, footprints in the soft earth, broken branches, and small piles of droppings. She realized that the forest was full of life, and perhaps if she paid attention, it could guide her. She remembered stories her mother had told her about watching the movements of animals to find water or shelter. She followed a trail of birds flying north, hoping they might lead her toward the open fields she remembered near her home. Every movement required attention, every sound demanded caution, but slowly she began to feel a small sense of control return. By mid-afternoon, she stumbled upon a familiar landmark. A large rock, shaped oddly like a fallen horse, stood near the riverbank. She had seen it many times when gathering water with her mother. Relief surged through her chest. She was on the right path. With renewed hope, she quickened her pace, moving toward the place she knew would lead her home. The forest, though still thick and challenging, seemed slightly less threatening. The sounds of the farm, the river, the distant calls of her neighbors began to reach her ears faintly, guiding her steps. When she finally came into sight of the fields near her home, she almost ran, tears streaming down her face. The familiar sight of the house, the garden, and the fence brought back memories of safety and warmth. But even as she neared the farm, a sense of dread settled in her stomach. She had changed. Something inside her was different. She felt a strange heaviness, a secret she could not yet understand. She entered the house quietly, hoping her family would not notice immediately. Her mother was in the kitchen, humming softly as she kneaded dough, and her father worked outside, his back to her. Eliza moved carefully, feeling the weight of what had happened pressing down on her. Her mother looked up, startled. "Eliza." "Is that you?" she cried, rushing forward. Her father came inside, wiping sweat from his brow. "Where have you been? We feared the worst." Eliza could hardly speak. She wanted to tell them everything, but the words stuck in her throat. She had survived, and that was enough for now. She allowed herself to be embraced, feeling the comfort of their warmth, even as fear and uncertainty lingered inside her. Days passed, and life began to settle back into a routine. Yet Eliza could not ignore the changes in her body. She felt unusual fatigue, occasional nausea, and a heaviness that she could not explain. At first, she thought it was from the fear and stress of the previous days, but gradually the truth became undeniable. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with a mixture of fear, confusion, and shame. She had survived the forest and the ordeal with the warriors, but now she faced a new challenge, one that she could not simply run from or escape. Eliza kept her secret carefully. She knew her community would not understand. People whispered about events they did not fully know, and judgment was quick. Her mother noticed subtle changes, paleness in her cheeks, a new weariness in her movements, but she did not press. Eliza had learned the art of quiet endurance, of keeping her emotions contained. She focused on her work around the house, tending the garden, helping with chores and preparing meals. Each day was a balance between keeping her secret and surviving the eyes and questions of others. As weeks turned into months, Eliza's belly began to show. She could no longer hide the truth completely, though she tried with loose clothing and careful movements. Her father noticed, and though his anger was silent, it was there, a heavy presence in the house. Eliza felt the weight of responsibility more acutely than ever. She would raise this child alone if she had to. She resolved that she would do her best, no matter what the community thought. Her strength grew quietly, like a seed taking root in the soil. Eliza found herself thinking often about the warrior who had taken her. She remembered his face, his dark eyes, the quiet strength with which he carried her through the forest. She realized he had made a mistake, that this had not been an act of cruelty but of circumstance. Still, the result of that mistake had changed her life forever. She did not know his name or where he was, but she could not ignore the connection he had unknowingly created through the child growing inside her. Despite her fears, Eliza began to prepare for the future. She made a small, warm space in the house where she could care for the child. She sewed tiny clothes from old fabric, cleaned the rooms meticulously, and gathered herbs and remedies to ensure she could provide basic care. She read quietly from her mother's books, learning about childbirth and child care. Her mind focused on survival and preparation, building a small world of safety and hope for the life she would soon bring into the world. As the months passed, the whispers of neighbors grew quieter, perhaps because they had little proof and more curiosity than judgment. Eliza moved carefully in the community, visiting only when necessary, always polite, always quiet. She learned to smile even when her heart was heavy, to answer questions without revealing too much, and to walk through life with dignity. Her inner strength became her shield, and her determination her guide. She was no longer just a girl who had faced fear in the forest. She was a young woman who would face the challenges of life head-on. One evening, as she sat by the fire, feeling the child move inside her, Eliza realized that her life had changed in ways she could not have imagined. She had faced danger, fear, and uncertainty, but she had survived. She would bring a new life into the world, and she would do it with courage. She whispered to herself softly, promising to protect her child, to love him, and to guide him through a world that could be harsh but also full of beauty and possibility. She knew that she would not be alone, that the strength she had found within herself would carry her and her child through whatever came next. Eliza's days became a rhythm of quiet preparation, hope, and reflection. She walked through the fields, feeling the warm sun on her face, and imagined the life she would give her child. She thought of her family, her home, and the small moments of happiness she had taken for granted before. Each day brought new challenges, but also new determination. She had survived a trial that could have destroyed her, and she was ready to face the next with courage and love. By the time the first snow of winter began to fall, covering the fields in white, Eliza was ready. She had accepted the changes within her, embraced the future she could not control, and found strength she did not know she possessed. The child inside her was a reminder of survival, resilience, and the unexpected twists of life. She had faced fear and danger and emerged with courage, ready to bring life and hope into a world that could sometimes seem dark and unforgiving. The winter was harsh, with snow covering the ground in a thick white blanket. The cold winds blew through the trees, making the house creak and groan as Eliza worked quietly inside. She spent her days preparing for the birth of her child, carefully sewing small clothes, mending blankets, and arranging a warm corner in the house. The chores were harder in the snow, but she moved with determination, each task a step toward ensuring she could care for her child. Her family helped as best they could, though the tension in the house was always present. They loved her, but the reality of the situation weighed on everyone. Eliza had learned to manage her fear, but as the day of delivery approached, she could not ignore the growing sense of worry. She had read and listened to stories of childbirth, but nothing could truly prepare her for the experience. She spent quiet evenings sitting by the fire, talking softly to the child inside her, promising safety, love, and a life full of hope. She imagined the face of her baby, wondering if it would resemble her or someone else entirely. She did not know the father, and yet the child was a part of her, and she would protect it no matter what. One cold night, the labor began. Pain shot through her body in waves, and she gripped the edges of the blanket, biting her lip to hold back cries. Her mother and father rushed to her side, helping as best they could. The house was filled with the sounds of urgency, soft murmurs, and the crackle of the fire. Eliza focused on her breathing, just as she had learned from reading, and concentrated on bringing her child safely into the world. Hours passed slowly, each one feeling like an eternity, until finally, a small, crying infant was placed into her arms. Tears filled her eyes as she held the baby close. He was small and fragile, with dark eyes that seemed wise beyond his days. The sound of his crying, which could have been overwhelming, became a melody of relief and joy. She kissed his tiny forehead, feeling a love so deep it seemed to fill every corner of her heart. "Welcome to the world, my son," she whispered, her voice trembling. Her family watched in quiet awe, helping her clean him and wrap him in warm blankets. The house, which had seemed so heavy with tension, now felt alive with a sense of wonder and hope. The days that followed were difficult. Eliza learned quickly that caring for a newborn required constant attention, patience, and strength. She fed him, cleaned him, and soothed him through long nights when he cried endlessly. Sleep became a rare treasure, and her body ached from exhaustion. Yet, every time she looked into his eyes, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Samuel, as she named him, became her reason to endure, her motivation to keep moving forward. His small hands clutched her fingers, and she smiled despite her fatigue, understanding that her life had changed forever in the most meaningful way. Life in the community continued, and Eliza faced challenges she had not anticipated. Neighbors whispered about the child, curious and judgmental, though no one dared to confront her openly. Some offered help in small ways, extra food, advice, or kind words, but others avoided her, keeping a distance that made her feel isolated. Eliza accepted the support she could, but she learned quickly to protect herself and her child from the opinions of others. She carried herself with quiet dignity, understanding that strength often meant enduring in silence. Her father, once distant, began to show his own form of acceptance. He helped with chores, brought extra firewood, and sometimes spoke softly to her about the boy's future. Her mother remained her closest ally, sharing small smiles and gentle words that reminded Eliza she was not entirely alone. Together, they created a small but safe world where Samuel could grow. Every morning, Eliza would watch the sun rise over the fields and the forests, thinking of the life she had survived and the new life she now held in her arms. As Samuel grew, so did his curiosity. He was bright and observant, always reaching for new things, watching the movements of birds and exploring the edges of the fields under careful supervision. Eliza taught him quietly, showing him how to tend the garden, care for animals, and notice the beauty in simple things. She told him stories about their home, the forest, and the lessons of life she had learned. Her voice was gentle but firm, and Samuel listened with wide eyes, absorbing each word. The villagers began to notice the boy's intelligence and gentle nature. Slowly, the whispers turned to admiration. Some came to Eliza for advice on caring for children, and others watched Samuel grow with a mix of curiosity and respect. The change was subtle but significant. Eliza realized that her perseverance, her quiet strength, and her unwavering love for her child had begun to transform the way people saw her. She had faced a difficult start, but she was creating a life of dignity and respect through her actions. Eliza also thought often of the father she had never known. She wondered about him, his life, and whether he thought of her or the child. Though she could not find answers, she carried no anger. Instead, she focused on what she could control: her love for Samuel, her care for her family, and the building of a safe, nurturing home. She spoke to the child often, telling him stories about courage, survival, and the importance of kindness. She wanted him to understand that life could be challenging, but love and resilience could overcome even the most difficult circumstances. Winter turned to spring, and the fields began to green again. Eliza and Samuel spent more time outside, feeling the warmth of the sun and listening to the songs of birds returning to the trees. She taught him to recognize plants, to help with simple chores, and to observe the world with curiosity and respect. Samuel learned quickly, his small hands skillful and his mind sharp. Eliza marveled at how much he had grown and how much life had returned to her heart. The fear and uncertainty of the past year seemed further away with each passing day. One morning, as they walked along the riverbank, Samuel stopped to point at a deer drinking from the water. His eyes sparkled with wonder, and Eliza felt a surge of pride. She realized that despite the challenges she had faced, she had given her child a gift far greater than safety: the ability to see the world with curiosity, courage, and compassion. She hugged him close, breathing in the fresh air, and whispered softly, "You are strong, my son. You will always find your way." Though life was far from easy, Eliza understood that the hardships she had endured had shaped her into a stronger, wiser person. She had survived the fear, the forest, and the uncertainty of her pregnancy. She had faced judgment, isolation, and exhaustion. Yet in the arms of her child, she had discovered a power she had never known: the power of love, perseverance, and resilience. Samuel had become a living symbol of hope and survival, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, life could bring unexpected joy and purpose. Eliza's days became a rhythm of work, teaching, and nurturing. Each night she would sit by the fire, watching Samuel sleep, and reflect on how far they had come. She understood that the road ahead would continue to have challenges, but she no longer feared the unknown. She had learned to face life with courage and to cherish the moments of peace and beauty. Her love for her child gave her strength, and her determination created a home full of warmth, safety, and hope. As Samuel grew older, he began to speak more clearly, ask questions, and express his thoughts. Eliza encouraged his curiosity, answering as honestly as she could, while teaching him the values of respect, kindness, and understanding. She told him stories about their family, the forest, and the lessons she had learned from life. Each story carried wisdom, resilience, and hope. Samuel listened eagerly, his bright eyes reflecting his growing understanding of the world. By the time Samuel was old enough to help in the garden and care for the animals, he had developed a sense of responsibility beyond his years. Eliza watched him with pride, knowing that the challenges of the past had not broken them but had strengthened their bond. Every day she saw the reflection of their journey in his actions, his curiosity, and his care for the world around him. She realized that the fear and uncertainty she had once felt had been transformed into courage, wisdom, and love. Eliza often thought about the future. She wanted Samuel to grow up knowing that life could be difficult, but it could also be beautiful. She wanted him to understand the importance of kindness, the value of resilience, and the power of love. She hoped that one day, he would face the world with courage and compassion, carrying with him the lessons she had taught and the strength they had discovered together. In those quiet moments by the fire holding her child, Eliza understood that her life had changed forever, but in ways that were meaningful and profound. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and hardship, yet she had created a life of love, hope, and dignity. Samuel was her greatest achievement, her reason to endure, and her source of endless joy. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, strengthened by the trials of the past and the love that bound them. Years passed, and Samuel grew taller and stronger with each passing season. He was bright, curious, and full of energy, always asking questions about the world around him. Eliza watched him closely, teaching him not only about the farm and the animals, but also about kindness, patience, and respect for others. She wanted him to understand that life could be both beautiful and difficult, and that the way he faced challenges would shape the person he would become. Every day was an opportunity for lessons, small and large, and Eliza embraced the chance to guide him. The villagers had begun to notice the boy's gentle nature and intelligence. People who had once whispered about Eliza's circumstances now offered quiet smiles and small gestures of respect. Some brought extra food, others offered advice on farming, and a few even helped when the work grew too heavy. Eliza accepted these gestures without arrogance or complaint. She had endured judgment before, and now she understood that earning respect required patience, quiet courage, and consistent effort. One spring morning, as the sun rose over the fields, Samuel ran toward the barn, calling out for his mother. "Look, Mother. I saw a fox near the river and it wasn't afraid at all." Eliza smiled, proud of her son's observation. She followed him to the riverbank where Samuel pointed excitedly at the small, red animal. "See, life is full of surprises," she said softly. "Sometimes we must watch carefully and learn, but we must never be afraid of the unknown." Samuel nodded eagerly, absorbing her words as naturally as he did the warmth of the sun on his face. Despite the peaceful days, the memory of past dangers still lingered in Eliza's mind. She knew the land could be unpredictable, and she had learned that caution was as important as courage. She taught Samuel to recognize signs of danger, unusual tracks in the snow, changes in animal behavior, or unexpected sounds in the forest. But she also reminded him to find beauty in the world, to enjoy the laughter of birds, the colors of flowers, and the calm of the river. She wanted him to grow up balanced, aware of risk, but also capable of appreciating life's simple joys. Eliza's relationship with her family evolved as well. Her parents, once worried and tense, now relaxed into a routine that included pride and care. They saw the strength their daughter had developed and the remarkable child she was raising. Her father helped with heavier farm work, bringing in firewood and repairing fences, while her mother shared knowledge of herbs and remedies, ensuring that Samuel stayed healthy. Together, the family formed a network of support that helped them face both daily chores and unforeseen challenges. One summer, a group of settlers from a distant town came to trade. Samuel, now old enough to help, observed the visitors with curiosity. He noticed how they spoke politely to Eliza and seemed impressed by her organization and the state of the farm. Eliza interacted with them gracefully, showing confidence she had not possessed years before. The visitors left with supplies and kind words, and Samuel realized that his mother had grown into a woman admired for her strength, resilience, and wisdom. He felt a swell of pride and love, understanding that the respect they now earned was a result of courage and effort, not chance. Life was not without hardship. Storms occasionally tore through the valley, destroying crops and making travel dangerous. Animals sometimes fell ill or went missing, and there were days when food was scarce. But Eliza faced each challenge with the same determination that had guided her through past fears. She taught Samuel to work patiently, to improvise solutions, and to remain calm under pressure. Together, they learned that even difficult situations could be overcome with cooperation, care, and perseverance. Samuel grew strong, capable, and resourceful under his mother's guidance. Eliza also found herself reflecting more on the past, on the warrior who had taken her so long ago. She wondered about him if he had lived, and if he had thought of the child he had unknowingly affected. Though curiosity tugged at her, she did not dwell on it in fear or anger. Instead, she used the memory to teach Samuel lessons about human complexity. "Sometimes people make mistakes," she said gently one evening. "Sometimes actions happen that we do not understand. What matters is how we live with what comes afterward." Samuel listened thoughtfully, absorbing not just the words but the wisdom behind them. As the years continued, Samuel grew increasingly independent. He could help tend the animals, plant and harvest crops, and even make small decisions about how to manage the farm. Eliza encouraged him to think for himself, to take responsibility, and to learn from mistakes. She understood that her role as a mother was evolving, from protector to guide. She needed to allow him to make choices, even if it meant letting go of some control. It was a delicate balance, but one she handled with patience and care. The relationship between mother and son deepened with each passing season. Samuel was not only her child, but also her companion, her helper, and her reason to face life's uncertainties with renewed courage. They spent long hours walking through the fields, exploring the forest and observing wildlife. Eliza taught him the names of plants and animals, how to recognize tracks in the snow, and the importance of observing nature carefully. Samuel absorbed everything with eagerness and a sense of wonder, learning lessons that went far beyond the farm. Eliza also began to think about the larger community. She realized that the isolation of their early years had changed. Villagers now respected her and Samuel, and she wanted to ensure that they contributed positively to the community. She encouraged Samuel to be kind, helpful, and fair. She reminded him that actions had consequences and that people would remember how he treated them. Slowly, Samuel became known not only as Eliza's son, but also as a bright, responsible boy who was shaping his own reputation through thoughtfulness and care. One day, a messenger arrived from a nearby settlement, asking for help with a young boy who had wandered off into the forest. Samuel, eager to help and guided by his mother's lessons, volunteered to accompany the search. Eliza gave him a small pack with food and a map, reminding him to be careful and observant. The boy was found after several hours, unharmed, and Samuel's courage and quick thinking impressed both the villagers and his mother. Eliza felt pride welling in her heart, knowing that he had taken her teachings and applied them to real situations, demonstrating wisdom and bravery. The seasons continued to pass, and Eliza's quiet strength became a model for others. She helped neighbors in need, shared her knowledge of farming and herbs, and offered guidance when she could. Samuel, too, began to understand the importance of community, recognizing that their lives were interconnected with those around them. He learned that respect and trust were earned through consistent actions, and that kindness could change perceptions over time. Eliza watched with satisfaction as her son grew into a young person of character, shaped by experience, love, and guidance. Despite the challenges they had faced, Eliza and Samuel found joy in daily life. They celebrated small victories, the first harvest of spring, the birth of animals, or the sighting of a rare bird in the forest. They laughed together, shared stories by the fire, and found contentment in their routines. Eliza knew that life would continue to bring difficulties, but she also understood that their bond, their resilience, and their commitment to each other provided a foundation that could withstand any trial. Eliza often reflected on her journey, from the fearful girl taken into the forest to the mother raising a wise and capable child. She realized that every challenge, every hardship had contributed to the strength and wisdom they now shared. She had faced danger, uncertainty, and judgment, but through it all, she had built a life of dignity, love, and purpose. Samuel, growing steadily into adolescence, was a living testament to her perseverance and courage, and she found comfort in knowing that her efforts had shaped not only his life, but their shared future. As the sun set over the valley one evening, painting the sky in warm shades of orange and pink, Eliza and Samuel walked along the river, enjoying the calm of the moment. Samuel looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Mother, do you think the world is always this big and full of surprises?" he asked. Eliza smiled, taking his hand in hers. "Yes, my son. The world is full of surprises, both good and challenging. What matters is how we face them, with courage, patience, and love." Samuel nodded, understanding that life was a journey of learning, observation, and resilience. In those quiet moments, Eliza realized that the trials of the past had prepared them for the future. She knew that challenges would continue to come, but she also understood that love, guidance, and perseverance could transform difficulties into strength. Samuel was growing into a person capable of facing life with wisdom and compassion, and she had played a central role in shaping that journey. Their bond, forged through adversity and nurtured with care, was a source of enduring strength and hope. The years moved on like the gentle flow of the river near Eliza's home. Samuel had grown into a strong, thoughtful young man with a deep sense of responsibility and curiosity. He was respected by the villagers, not only for his intelligence but for his kindness and willingness to help others. Eliza watched him with quiet pride. The boy she had once held in her arms, fragile and new to the world, had become a capable, wise young man, shaped by experience, love, and the lessons she had patiently taught him. Eliza herself had changed as well. The girl who had faced fear in the forest had become a woman of strength, resilience, and quiet authority. Life had not been easy, but it had been full. Every hardship had left a mark on her character, but also on her heart, teaching her patience, courage, and the power of love. She understood that the events of her past had shaped her path, but they did not define her entirely. She had chosen how to live, how to respond to adversity, and how to nurture her child into a capable person. One morning, as she prepared food for Samuel before he left for the fields, she paused to reflect. The sun was rising over the distant hills, casting golden light on the land she had learned to love so deeply. Memories of the past came to her, the fear she had felt when taken by the warriors, the lonely hours in the forest, the first moments of motherhood, and the struggles of early life with Samuel. Each memory carried pain but also lessons, and she felt a profound sense of gratitude for the strength she had discovered within herself. Samuel approached her, carrying tools for the morning work. "Mother, the fields are ready for planting today," he said with a smile. Eliza nodded, feeling a warmth in her heart. "Thank you, Samuel. Your help makes this work much easier," she replied. She looked at him closely and realized that he had grown into a young man who could face the world confidently, yet still retained the compassion and gentleness she had hoped to instill in him. Her heart swelled with pride and a quiet joy that came from knowing she had guided him well. Life continued with its rhythms, seasons passing from spring to summer, then autumn to winter. Each season brought new tasks and responsibilities, but also moments of beauty. Samuel and Eliza worked side by side, planting seeds, tending animals, and maintaining the home. They celebrated the harvest, the birth of new animals, and the simple joys of warm days and starry nights. They laughed, shared stories, and found comfort in each other's company. The home that had once been filled with fear and uncertainty was now a place of love, security, and hope. Eliza often reflected on the future, thinking about the kind of person Samuel would become and the life he would lead. She understood that she could not protect him from every difficulty, but she had given him tools to face life with courage, patience, and integrity. She reminded him frequently of the importance of kindness, honesty, and hard work. Samuel listened attentively, absorbing her wisdom like a sponge. He had grown up learning that life could bring unexpected challenges, but that every challenge was an opportunity to learn and grow. The villagers continued to respect Eliza and Samuel, though the early whispers of judgment had long since faded. People admired Eliza's resilience, her quiet strength, and her dedication to raising her child well. Samuel, in turn, became known for his helpfulness, intelligence, and compassion. Eliza often saw other young people in the village look to him as an example, and she felt a deep satisfaction knowing that the lessons she had taught were influencing not just her son, but the wider community. Eliza also thought frequently about the past, the incident that had changed her life and led to Samuel's existence. She never felt bitterness toward the warrior who had taken her, though curiosity about him lingered. She reflected on the complexity of life, how events beyond one's control could shape a person's future. She taught Samuel these lessons as well, helping him understand that life is full of unexpected twists, and that how one responds is more important than the circumstances themselves. One day, as Samuel and Eliza walked along the river, Samuel asked a question that made her pause. "Mother, do you ever think about the man who brought me into the world?" he asked softly. Eliza looked at him, her heart filling with a mix of emotions. "I do, my son," she said gently, "but I do not hold anger. Life is full of mistakes and misunderstandings. What matters is what we do afterward, how we live, and the love we share." Samuel nodded thoughtfully, understanding that forgiveness and resilience were not signs of weakness, but of great strength. As the years went on, Samuel began to take on more responsibilities around the farm and in the village. He helped neighbors, offered advice, and assisted in tasks that required knowledge and skill. People came to rely on him, not only because of his intelligence, but because of the integrity he demonstrated in every action. Eliza observed this transformation with pride. The child she had once feared for, the boy who had been born under uncertain circumstances, had grown into a young man who inspired respect and admiration. Eliza herself found peace in these years. She no longer carried the heavy fear that had once dominated her life. She had faced the worst and survived. She had nurtured a child, guided him through challenges, and helped him grow into a capable, compassionate individual. Her life was full, not of perfection but of meaning. She understood that happiness was not the absence of hardship, but the ability to endure, to love, and to grow stronger through every experience. One autumn evening, the village gathered for a small festival celebrating the harvest. Samuel and Eliza participated together, enjoying the music, the laughter, and the shared meals. The villagers spoke to them with warmth and admiration, recognizing not only their hard work but the strength of character they demonstrated. Samuel helped organize games for the children and assisted elders with tasks that required skill and care. Eliza watched him, feeling a quiet joy and gratitude. The community that had once judged her now embraced her and her son, seeing the life they had built through courage, dedication, and love. As night fell and the festival lights glowed softly, Eliza took Samuel's hand and led him to a quiet spot by the river. The reflection of the stars danced on the water, and the gentle sound of the current was calming. "Samuel," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "look at how far we have come. We have faced fear, uncertainty, and challenges. But together we have built a life full of hope, love, and meaning." Samuel smiled, understanding fully the depth of her words. "Yes, mother," he replied softly. "I am proud of us. I am proud of you." Eliza felt a sense of completion, not because life was perfect, but because they had turned trials into lessons and hardships into growth. She realized that the events of the past, the fear, the forest, the uncertainty of her pregnancy, had all contributed to the strength and wisdom they now shared. Samuel had become a living testament to the power of love, courage, and perseverance. She had faced challenges beyond her imagining, yet she had created a legacy of hope and resilience. In the following years, Eliza continued to teach Samuel about life, values, and the importance of kindness. She encouraged him to explore the world beyond the village, to learn from experiences, and to carry the lessons of compassion and perseverance wherever he went. Samuel, eager and thoughtful, absorbed her guidance while also learning from the world around him. He became a young man ready to face life with confidence, equipped with the wisdom and strength his mother had instilled in him. Eliza often reflected quietly on the meaning of her journey. She had faced fear and uncertainty, yet she had chosen love over despair. She had nurtured a child under difficult circumstances and had watched him grow into a person of integrity and compassion. Her life had been shaped by challenges, but she had also shaped the life of another in the process. She understood that the choices we make, the care we give, and the courage we summon define the true measure of a life. One morning, as she looked out over the fields with Samuel by her side, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth. Birds called to one another from the branches, and the river flowed steadily, a reminder of life's continuity. Eliza realized that the journey they had traveled together, from fear and uncertainty to growth, love, and resilience, had been transformative. She had not only survived but had created a life of meaning, leaving a legacy of courage and hope for her son. Eliza placed her hand on Samuel's shoulder, feeling the warmth and strength of the young man he had become. "Remember, my son," she said softly, "life will continue to bring challenges, but you have the strength, the wisdom, and the love to face whatever comes. Live with kindness, courage, and patience, and you will always find your way." Samuel nodded, understanding the depth of her words. He knew that his mother's journey had taught him lessons he would carry for the rest of his life. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light over the fields, Eliza and Samuel began their day together. The hardships of the past were behind them, but the lessons remained. They worked, laughed, and lived with purpose, knowing that the love and guidance that had carried them through difficult times would continue to sustain them. The village, the fields, and the forests were all part of the life they had built, a life grounded in courage, resilience, and the enduring bond between a mother and her child.